Morning at Haven's Corner Diner began with the soft jingle of an old doorbell each time the wind slipped through, carrying the chill of March, the thin scent of brewed coffee mixed with the faint, burnt smell of overcooked pancakes seeping into every layer of clothing, clinging to hair, and settling into the cracked skin of hands worn raw from washing dishes every day. Maya Thompson, 27, wore a cream apron faded with time, the grease stains impossible to wash out, silent markers of days survived on meager tips. Her dark brown hair was tied neatly at the nape of her neck, and her deep brown eyes held dark circles from nights spent awake caring for her mother with heart disease. Yet, when Maya looked at customers, she still carried a gentle smile, a kind of gentleness she herself didn't quite understand how she still managed to keep. "Would you like some more sugar, sir?" she asked an elderly man sitting quietly in the corner, his hands trembling as he held his cup of hot coffee. He looked up, eyes glistening, and nodded instead of speaking. The diner was old. Cracks ran down the walls where a faded coffee $1 poster hung. The loose screws on the chairs squeaked when customers shifted, and the coffee machine leaked every morning. But for Maya, this place was home. It was where she learned how to grow up, learned patience with difficult customers, learned how to listen to the sad stories of strangers. It was where she saw her mother smile weakly when Maya brought home leftover pancakes, joking it was a 5-star breakfast before the painkillers took effect. Maya once dreamed of becoming a nurse. She had even been accepted into a community nursing school with a partial scholarship. But then, on the very day she was supposed to pay her first tuition bill, her mother collapsed. The savings meant for her nursing dream turned into hospital bills, medication, ambulance rides, and long nights sitting beside a hospital bed, listening to the uneven beeping of a heart monitor. And so, this diner, with its minimum wage and slow trickle of tips, became the only way Maya could keep her mother alive and keep a small roof over their heads. That morning, Haven's Corner Diner opened as it always did. Maya cleaned each table still sticky with the smell of burnt pancakes, wiped the thin layer of dust off the spice rack, took a deep breath, and smiled at Hector, the pot-bellied cook who always cracked jokes to chase away the weariness of the morning shift. She didn't know that on that seemingly ordinary morning, when a strange man walked in wearing a worn-out coat with frayed shoulders, eyes lost as he scanned the diner for the cheapest seat. Everything in her life was about to change. She didn't know that the biggest turning points in life often come from the smallest moments: a glance, an empty wallet, a simple breakfast. She didn't know that the kindness she chose to hold on to would lead to a confrontation, would get her labeled as weak, pushed around, gossiped about behind her back. She didn't know that a single small decision to keep a stranger's smile alive would open a door she never dared to dream of. In that moment, Maya only knew one thing: if I can't give people an easier life, at least I can give them an easier morning. And that was the moment when everything began. The bell on Haven's Corner Diner rang again, softer this time, as the wooden door scraped against the chipped tile floor. A man walked in, tall and thin, wearing a faded grey coat, tugging lightly on his knit cap to cover the grey-streaked hair falling over his forehead. Maya noticed the shoes he wore scuffed at the toes, one sole patched with duct tape, like his life was clinging to the last bit of warmth it could find. He looked around, hesitating for a second before choosing the last table by the window, where the light coming through the fogged-up glass highlighted the calluses on his hands as he rested them on the table. Maya picked up a menu, took a breath, and walked over. Even as her heart sank, the smile on her lips remained. "Good morning, sir. Is this spot okay? It's a bit chilly by the window." He looked up, his grey-blue eyes meeting hers, hesitant, unfamiliar. In that moment, Maya saw a deep, hollow exhaustion, not the kind from a sleepless night, but from years of being lost. "Thank you. It's fine." His voice was hoarse, light as dry leaves, yet polite. Maya poured him a glass of water, then a cup of hot black coffee. She noticed the way he looked at the coffee with quiet gratitude, his hands trembling slightly as he lifted it, the steam covering the dry cracks of his rough hands. "Would you like to look over the menu first? Or would you like me to suggest some of the breakfast specials we have this morning?" Maya asked, her eyes warm with sincerity, the kind that made customers nod in trust. He took the menu, his eyes scanning the prices before reading the names of the dishes. Each number was a reminder of his thin wallet. "I'll just have the cheapest thing." Maya's brows knit slightly, but she didn't question him further. She nodded. "All right, a basic pancake with coffee, morning special price." "Don't worry, sir. I'll bring it right out." As she turned away, she caught sight of him in the reflection of the bar mirror, sneaking open his wallet, coins falling onto the table, which he quickly swept back in, his eyes darting around in fear, as if terrified someone would see that moment of weakness. Behind the counter, Diane, the morning shift assistant manager, stood with her arms crossed, eyes flicking toward Maya, her voice hissing through clenched teeth. "Don't let him eat and leave without paying. Last time a bum did that, I had to take it out of your tips." Maya stayed silent. She knew Diane didn't like her. Diane had once told Maya she was too soft, not fit for customer service because she would help customers grab extra napkins, bring extra bread to elderly patrons, or hold the door open for young mothers pushing strollers. Maya poured another coffee, eyes on the man in the corner, her heart tightening when she saw him set down his empty wallet, his eyes tearing up as he stared out the window. In that moment, memories of her mother came flooding back. The night her mother found out she was in the final stage of heart disease. She sat at the edge of the bed, holding a medication bill, her eyes red but still managing a weak smile as she looked at Maya's sweetheart. "If you ever see someone in despair, give them hope. Don't worry about what you lose." "Okay." Maya took a deep breath. She knew Diane would scold her. She might lose her tip, might be seen as a fool, but she couldn't just stand by watching someone shiver because they couldn't afford breakfast. She turned around, carrying a plate of pancakes with a few fresh strawberries left over from the special they served regulars, and gently placed it in front of him. "Please, have breakfast on me today." He looked up, eyes wide, then wet, his thin shoulders trembling. I can't. Sometimes people just need an easier morning." Don't you think Maya smiled? A real smile. No longer the kind worn for customer service. He looked at Maya for a long moment, then nodded, his hands gripping the edge of the table to keep himself from breaking down. Maya turned back toward the counter, trying to stifle a sigh. She could feel Diane's eyes on her, filled with scorn, her dark red lips curling in satisfaction as if she'd found another reason to tear Maya down. Such an idiot. Diane muttered loud enough for Maya to hear, her voice cold with triumph. Keep giving away food, then cry at the end of the month when you can't pay your rent. Liam, the barista, added, stirring a customer's coffee with careless indifference. A soft laugh followed, enough to tear through the fragile peace inside Maya. She bent down to wipe the counter, feeling the whispers around her like tiny needles pricking at her back. For a moment, Maya wanted to scream. "What do you know about me? About my mom? About the nights I stay awake worrying about her medication?" But she stayed silent, gripping the damp rag, the scent of lemon cleaner stinging her nose. In the corner, the man in the worn coat continued to watch Maya. He didn't eat right away. He used his fork to cut a small piece of pancake, placed it in his mouth, chewing slowly. Each bite was like a blessing, and his eyes glistened as he watched Maya gently pour water for another table, help an elderly lady reach for a paper bag, soothe a crying baby with a small cookie Maya kept aside for moments like these. He quietly observed how Maya knelt to retie a young boy's shoelace, her eyes kind, her hands gentle, her voice soft. "Your shoelace came undone. Sweetheart, let me tie it for you." No one knew that man was remembering every detail, the patient look in Maya's eyes, the way she listened to an old woman talk about her late husband, the way she said, "Have a lovely day, sir," with a genuine smile even when customers left without tipping. He wasn't homeless, even if he didn't look much better off. In the pocket of his worn coat was a thin leather notebook, pages filled with tiny notes, and a silver-capped fountain pen with chipped paint. Every action Maya took was marked with a small tick, with the word "genuine" written beside it. Maya returned to the counter, catching his eyes through the steam rising from the teapot, feeling a bit shy, but still managing to smile. "Was breakfast good?" "Sir." He nodded, lips trembling, a strange warmth lighting up his eyes. "It was delicious. Thank you." A few seconds of silence passed before Maya turned away, and he softly said, "You're a good girl." Maya froze, her eyes glistening for a brief moment, but she didn't turn back. She only smiled faintly, hiding the tear forming at the corner of her eye. "I just want people to have an easier morning, that's all." Behind the counter, Diane muttered to Liam, "Look at her, probably thinks she's some kind of angel saving the world." A scoffed laugh followed, but it couldn't drown out the clinking of cups and dishes, couldn't drown out the ring of the doorbell as a new customer walked in, couldn't drown out the sunlight that touched Maya's face as she lifted her head, wiped her tears, and smiled once more. She didn't know that each of those small actions was being recorded in a notebook, being etched into the memory of a man she thought was just another poor stranger. She didn't know that the man, Thomas Rowe, was in fact the new owner of Haven's Corner Diner, going undercover to see how the staff treated customers when they thought no one was paying attention. She didn't know that her gentle eyes, her quiet refusal to let her heart harden, had awakened in him old memories of a diner where he once washed dishes, and of a young woman who once helped him stand back up when his life had hit rock bottom. And she didn't know that morning would become the morning that changed everything. That afternoon, Haven's Corner Diner started to fill up, the bell on the door ringing constantly, the smell of frying burgers and potatoes mixing with the stale scent of old coffee. Maya moved like a hummingbird between tables, swiftly pouring water, carrying trays, clearing glasses, her smile never fading even as her legs began to ache. Diane stood behind the counter, flipping through the receipt book, casting cold glances at Maya. Every time Maya bent down to pick up a fallen napkin, Diane would smirk, whispering to Liam, such a poor angel type, wanting to play the good girl. A sarcastic laugh followed, loud enough for Maya to hear, but quiet enough that the customers wouldn't notice. Maya's heart pinched, but she didn't let it show. She continued serving an elderly couple, helping them cut their pancakes, bringing extra syrup, picking up crumbs, smiling every time the old man said thank you. In the corner, Thomas Rowe, still wearing his frayed coat, holding his coffee cup, watched everything. He saw the way Diane looked at Maya, the way Liam smirked when Maya helped a young mother soothe her crying child, the way Maya's eyes reddened, but she still listened patiently to customers sharing their stories. Quietly, he wrote in his notebook, kindness under pressure, leadership potential. At the peak of the lunch rush, a group of college students came in, laughing loudly, ordering the cheapest items, and leaving a mess across the table. They took pictures, live-streamed on TikTok, and tossed teasing remarks at Maya as she cleaned their table. "Hey, you smile pretty, lady. You gonna be here tomorrow? Bet she's working here 'cause she can't afford to eat." Giggles rang out. Liam nearby curled his lips into a grin, and Diane glanced over, then turned away without asking them to be polite. Maya took a deep breath, her fingers whitening as she gripped the tray, but she still smiled. "Would you like some more water? I'll bring it over." "Oh my God, she's so dumb. We're live streaming." One girl in the group cackled, turning her phone camera toward Maya, catching her face with a flicker of embarrassment. Thomas saw everything. He saw the hurt flicker across Maya's eyes before she pulled her smile back on, set the water jug on their table, gently filled each cup, and wished them, "Have a wonderful day." When the group finally left, they abandoned a table covered in crumbs, napkins scattered on the floor, water spilled across the surface. Maya bent down to pick up each piece of trash, wiped each streak of water, her hands cold and back aching, but she cleaned everything without a single complaint. Diane watched from the counter, arms crossed, mumbling, "Let's see how many tips that kindness will get you." No one knew that a small hidden camera in the corner of the diner was recording every moment, streaming live to a laptop in the hotel where Thomas Rowe was staying. Capturing each moment, Maya bent to pick up napkins, wiped water, every sad glance that still ended in a smile, all documented for a quiet test. When Maya finished cleaning, the students were long gone, leaving no tip behind, only their laughter and mocking words lingering in the air. Maya stood up, her hands shaking slightly, eyes red, but when she saw an elderly man struggling with the door, she hurried to hold it open, helping him push his walker over the threshold. "Thank you, young lady," the old man said softly, gratitude in his eyes. Maya smiled, replying gently, "Have a peaceful day, sir." Thomas closed his notebook, his eyes reflecting an emotion hard to describe: respect, a hint of regret, and a quiet resolve. He remembered himself at 22, washing dishes in a small diner, getting scolded by customers, looked down on by co-workers, just because he had handed an extra piece of bread to a hungry child. And now he was seeing that same image in Maya, a person who refused to let her kindness be stolen, even in a cold industry like food service. By late afternoon, Haven's Corner Diner entered its slow hour, with only the groan of the coffee machine, the faint smell of burnt waffles, and the sound of spoons against ceramic. Maya wiped counters, cleaned tables, checked the cream pitchers and sauce bottles, preparing for the last wave of customers. Diane, the shift manager, stood by the register, counting tips from the glass jar. The clinking of coins filled the air as Diane's cold eyes glanced at Maya, her voice low but clear enough to reach her ears. "Who do you think you are, Maya? Using your tips to feed poor customers, you planning to play the savior here?" Maya tightened her grip on the rag, looking at Diane, her eyes no longer fearful, only tired. "I'm not playing, Diane. I just don't want to watch someone walk out of here hungry." Diane let out a cold laugh, her dark red lips curling in disdain. "That's not your job. Your job is to take orders fast, turn tables fast, and not annoy customers with pity stories. Sometimes customers don't need fast orders. They just need someone to smile at them." Maya replied, her voice soft but firm. Diane's slippers scraped against the floor as she stepped closer, her eyes glinting with annoyance. "Listen, Maya, if you keep pulling this pay-for-their-meal stunt, I'll have to report you to upper management. We're not in the business of playing hero here. We're in the business of making money." Maya pressed her lips together, her throat tight, eyes stinging. But she remembered the look in the old man's eyes that morning when she brought him pancakes, remembered her mother's words, "If you see someone in despair, give them hope." She didn't reply to Diane. She quietly turned, dropped the rag into the bucket, washed her hands, and went to take the order of a new customer who had just walked in the corner. Thomas Rowe was still sitting. He saw everything. He saw the way Maya stood tall in front of Diane, the way her eyes glistened, but she did not lower her head. He saw Diane's arms crossed, her cold smirk before she turned back to count money as if it was the only thing that defined a person's worth. Thomas sipped his now cold coffee, set the cup down, pulled out his chipped silver fountain pen, and wrote in his notebook, "Diane toxic, Maya integrity under pressure." Maya returned to the counter, bringing a glass of water to an elderly couple, her gentle smile intact. "Here's some lemon water for you. The afternoon air is so dry today." The old man smiled kindly, holding his wife's hand, nodding. "Thank you, dear." In that moment, Maya felt her heart lighten, even though her hands were still trembling, even though her legs ached from standing all day. She didn't know how long she would keep working as a waitress. Didn't know if this month's wages would cover her mother's medication, but at least today she didn't let her heart be stolen by scorn. The afternoon passed, and Haven's Corner Diner closed early for deep cleaning. Maya and Hector, the kind-hearted head cook, scrubbed the kitchen, washed the floors, cleaned the pots and pans. Diane circled the dining area, scrutinizing every detail, shooting glances at Maya each time she slowed down to pick up trash under the tables. Before leaving, Diane stood at the door, turning to look at Maya. "Remember what I said, Maya. Good people don't last long here." Maya stood in the dim diner, streetlights shining through the cracked window onto her face. She smiled, not the smile for customers, not the polite smile, but the smile of someone who had just decided she would not let anyone take away her kindness, no matter how much power they held. Outside, in the night air, Thomas Rowe stood under a tree, watching the yellow light shine on the foggy window where Maya was still wiping down the tables one last time before turning off the lights. He took a long breath, the smell of night air mixed with the stale scent of coffee still lingering on his coat. In his hand, the notebook was closed, the final lines on the page reading, "Maya ready." He pulled out his phone, dialing a saved number. "Lucas, set up an urgent meeting with the Haven's Corner branch tomorrow. We're going to end this test." The next morning, Haven's Corner Diner didn't open at its usual time. A hastily written sign hung on the door, closed until 11 a.m. for staff meeting. "We apologize for the inconvenience." Inside, the yellow lights illuminated tense faces. Hector stood next to Maya, arms folded over his apron, while Maya clasped her hands tightly, heart pounding. Diane sat leaning against the counter, legs crossed, eyes smug, while Liam yawned, glancing at Maya with a mocking grin. "Bet a few people are losing their hours today," Diane whispered, loud enough for Maya to hear. Maya clenched her fists, eyes fixed on the cracked tile floor, her breathing quickening. She was afraid she would lose this job, afraid her mother wouldn't have money for next month's medication, afraid that her simplest dream just to maintain a normal life would shatter because of a kindness she couldn't silence. The doorbell rang, not from a customer, but as Thomas Rowe stepped inside, no longer wearing his old coat. He wore a white dress shirt, dark trousers, a sleek grey jacket, and held a leather briefcase in his hand, his thin face serious but not cold. His eyes swept across the room, pausing for a moment on Maya before shifting to Diane. "Thank you all for coming in early," he said, his voice deep and clear. "I'm Thomas Rowe, the new owner of Haven's Corner Diner and the Corner hospitality chain." Diane froze, her eyes wide, the pen in her hand falling to the floor. Liam stared, eyes round, while Hector smiled softly, nodding as if he had suspected this all along. Thomas set his briefcase on the counter, opened it, and took out a laptop, connecting it to a small projector. The light from the projector shone onto an old white curtain, displaying a familiar scene this very diner, from an angle of the security camera that no one paid attention to. For the past 2 months, I've been visiting every branch of Haven's, not as the owner, but as a regular customer, or as someone you didn't notice. Maya's heart pounded so hard she felt every other sound in the room disappear. The screen showed Maya bringing the pancake plate to Thomas in his poor customer disguise, and her voice played, saying, "Sometimes people just need an easier morning, don't you think?" "Sir?" The image froze, heavy breathing filling the room. Diane glanced at Maya, her face draining of color, lips pressed into a thin, tight line. Thomas turned, his gaze resting on Maya, an expression not of reprimand, but of quiet recognition. He nodded, then played the next clip, Maya bending to pick up scraps of paper left by the college students. Maya soothing a crying child. Maya helping an elderly woman pull open the door, always keeping her smile even in exhaustion. "This," Thomas said, his voice calm but each word ringing clear, "is exactly why Havens used to be a place people loved. A place customers didn't just come to eat, but to find a moment of comfort in their lives." He switched the video. The screen showed Diane, arms crossed, saying to Liam, "Good people don't last long here." Diane's voice echoed coldly, followed by Liam's snide chuckle. Diane's face drained of color, her lips trembling. "This is a violation of privacy. You can't—" Thomas cut her off, his voice cold but not raised. "Privacy doesn't protect a lack of integrity." "Diane." He glanced at Liam, his eyes pausing just long enough to make Liam lower his head, his hands shaking. Thomas closed the laptop, and the small meeting room fell into a suffocating silence. His eyes swept across the room, stopping on Maya. "Miss Maya Thompson," Thomas called, his voice softer now. Maya lifted her head, her eyes shimmering, her legs shaking so badly she had to grip the edge of her chair. "Because of you, I remembered why I once loved this work. The way you do your job, the way you care for customers. It can't be trained. It can't be faked. It's the kind of value Havens needs to survive." He turned to Diane, his voice lowering. "Diane, being a manager isn't about supervising, threatening, or wielding harshness as a weapon. You've forgotten that." Diane opened her mouth to speak, but Thomas raised his hand. "You'll have two options, and I'll inform you of them clearly later. For now, this meeting is over." Thomas took a breath, his gaze softening as he looked at all the employees. Havens will change, and that change begins with people who dare to keep smiling, who dare to keep kindness alive, even when everyone around them sees it as weakness. He looked back at Maya, giving a small nod, then left the diner, leaving behind a silence where everyone knew a storm had just passed, leaving behind an inevitable change. After that fateful meeting, Haven's Corner Diner was filled with tense silence. Diane hurried outside, her face pale, clutching her phone with lost eyes. Hector gently patted Maya on the shoulder before heading back to the kitchen, his eyes filled with worry, but also a flicker of hope. Maya stood alone by the counter, her hands still trembling. Thomas's words echoed in her mind. The images that had flashed on that old projector screen, those moments she thought no one saw. Those small acts of kindness she did simply because it felt like the only way to keep a piece of humanity alive in this job. She didn't know if she should feel ashamed, afraid, or relieved. All she knew was that her chest ached, as if she had just set down an invisible burden she had been carrying. The bell above the door rang, but it wasn't a customer. It was Thomas Rowe, returning. He wasn't carrying his briefcase or laptop, just wearing a light jacket, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. "Do you have a moment, Maya?" he asked, his voice gentle yet firm. Maya nodded, her hands clasped together to steady her nerves. Thomas handed her a cup of coffee, and they sat at the table near the window, where the morning sun slanted through the foggy glass, painting warm stripes across the floor. Thomas took a sip of coffee, looking at Maya. "You know, many years ago, I used to be a server just like you." Maya's eyes widened in surprise. "Back then, I thought all I needed to do was perform well, be quick, not complain, not get yelled at by management, and that would be enough. But then I met a customer, an elderly woman I didn't know that day's meal was all she could afford. When she pulled out her empty wallet, I paid for her meal." Thomas paused, looking out the window where cars passed by in the morning light. "That day, I got yelled at by my manager. They told me I didn't understand business, but I never regretted it." He looked back at Maya, his eyes clear and steady. "You did the right thing, Maya. I want you to know that." Maya looked down, her hands trembling around the coffee cup, tears welling in her eyes. She whispered, her voice catching, I just couldn't ignore someone who was hungry." "That's what makes you different," Thomas said, his voice soft but sure. He pulled out a piece of paper from his jacket pocket, placing it on the table, sliding it toward Maya. "This is an opportunity, and also a thank you." Maya looked at the paper, her eyes widening when she read the header, "Promotion Proposal, Assistant Branch Manager Position." Below was a salary nearly double what she currently earned, full health insurance, and flexible hours to care for her mother. Maya looked up, tears brimming in her eyes. "But I don't have management experience." Thomas smiled, a rare smile that made him look younger. "Management doesn't start with experience. It starts with heart. You have the care, the patience, and the courage to do what's right, even when you're criticized for it." Maya was silent, tears falling onto her hands. Images of her mother flashed in her mind, the thin woman with the weak smile, who once said, "If the world is too harsh, keep a small space in your heart for kindness." Now, Maya realized that kindness had become the key to a door she had never dared to dream of opening. Thomas stood, placing a hand on Maya's shoulder. "You don't have to give me an answer today, but I hope you know Havens needs people like you. Customers need people like you." He left, leaving Maya sitting alone in the quiet diner, sunlight falling across the promotion letter on the table, tears streaming down her cheeks, blending into a soft smile, a smile of hope, of renewal, of a new door just opened. That afternoon, Maya sat alone in the corner of Haven's Corner Diner, the promotion letter in front of her, offering a salary that would cover her mother's medication, pay off the overdue rent, and allow Maya to breathe without fearing tomorrow. But the words Diane had spoken, the sneers from people around her, still echoed in her mind. Good people don't last long in this industry. You're so naive. Maya, kindness doesn't pay the bills. Maya clenched her fists, her knuckles whitening. She looked out the window, where pedestrians hurried by, each carrying their own invisible burdens. That night, Maya returned to her small apartment. Her mother had fallen asleep in the old recliner, her breathing raspy, the pill bottle on the table holding only one last pill. Maya gently placed a thin blanket over her mother, then sat down on the floor, leaning against the chair, her eyes stinging as she looked at her mother's now hollowed face. She remembered Thomas's eyes when he said, "Management doesn't start with experience. It starts with heart." And Maya understood that this choice wasn't just for herself, but for her mother, for the customers who had walked in with tired eyes but left with a smile, even a small one, because of a free glass of lemon water, or a simple wish for an easier morning. Yet fear still wrapped around Maya like a shadow. If she accepted this position, would Diane try to tear her down? Would the co-workers who had mocked her turn against her? Would she lose herself in reports, numbers, and strict oversight, becoming another Diane, shaped by the system? The next morning, Maya arrived at the diner early. Haven's Corner Diner was quiet in the dawn light, the scent of coffee in the air, the ticking of the wall clock clear and sharp. She stood before the mirror in the restroom, looking at herself, a thin face, deep brown eyes with dark circles, hair tied back, wearing a worn uniform, a server living on tips, but also a person who hadn't given up, who hadn't let her heart grow cold. Maya placed a hand on her chest, taking a deep breath. This path won't be easy. Maya, she told herself, but if not me, then who will keep kindness alive in this place? When Maya stepped back out, Diane was already there. Diane stood with her arms crossed, leaning against the counter, her eyes glancing at Maya. "So, I hear the boss offered you a promotion." "Huh?" Maya stayed silent, setting down her bag, putting on her apron, preparing to open the diner. "You think you're so special. Management isn't a game for kids. No one's going to listen to you. Don't turn yourself into a joke." "Maya." Diane's voice was cold, but her eyes flickered with a hint of fear. Maya realized that, deep down, Diane was afraid of losing the power she clung to. Maya lifted her head, looking directly into Diane's eyes, her voice soft but firm. "You're right. Management isn't easy. But I don't want to be the kind of person who makes employees afraid, or makes customers leave feeling like they're being rushed out." Diane scoffed. "So you think you're going to change anything?" Maya took a deep breath. "I can't change everything, but I can start by listening to customers, respecting co-workers, and making Haven's a place people actually want to come back to." Diane clenched her hands, turned away, saying nothing. At that moment, Thomas walked into the diner, holding a cup of hot coffee, his eyes on Maya, filled with recognition and quiet satisfaction as he saw her standing tall, her eyes no longer afraid. "Have you made your decision?" "Maya?" he asked, his voice soft yet steady. Maya looked at him, taking a deep breath, then nodded. "I accept. Mr. Rowe." But I have one condition." "What condition?" Thomas raised an eyebrow, smiling faintly. "I want every employee here to receive training, not just on how to serve, but on how to treat each other, the customers, and themselves." Thomas was silent for a moment, then nodded. "Deal." On Maya's first day stepping into Haven's Corner Diner as assistant branch manager, a light rain fell, cold wind brushing against her face as she opened the door. The same worn uniform still hung on her shoulders, but over her heart, the name tag had changed from server to assistant manager. She looked down at the badge, took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly, not out of fear, but because of the weight of new responsibility settling onto her shoulders. She knew today wouldn't be easy. Hector was the first to walk in, his gentle smile accompanied by a small nod. "Congratulations, young lady." Maya smiled, warmth rising in her chest. "Thank you, Uncle Hector. I'll do my best." Diane walked in right after, slamming the door, her coat wet from the rain, her eyes flicking toward the badge on Maya's chest, her lips pressing into a thin line. "We need to talk." "Maya," Diane said, her voice cold. "I'm listening." "Diane, so you think this new title means you can start bossing everyone around?" Diane crossed her arms, her eyes sharp. Maya took a deep breath. "No, Diane, I'm not here to boss anyone around. I'm here to support everyone, to make Havens better, and to make sure customers feel welcome when they walk into this diner." Diane scoffed. "You're still so naive." Maya didn't respond, choosing instead to walk over to the counter, starting the morning coffee, preparing utensils, wiping down tables, and neatly arranging menus. She moved with the same habitual rhythm. But today, every movement was steadier, more deliberate, because she knew she was no longer just a server. She was now the one tasked with protecting the soul of Havens. When the diner opened, the first customer was the elderly man who once received a free lemon water refill from Maya. He shuffled in with his cane, moving slowly toward the counter. "Congratulations, young lady," he said. Maya smiled, bowing her head slightly. "Thank you, sir. I'll do my best to keep this place somewhere you'll always want to return to." "You already have," the old man replied, sitting down at his usual table, smiling. The morning passed with many curious glances from regular customers, whispering as they saw Maya standing behind the counter with her management badge, as they saw her personally pour coffee for a young mother holding her child, as they saw her patiently listen to an elderly customer share stories about last Christmas. Midway through the morning, something happened. A man walked in, clothes dirty, smelling of rain and cigarette smoke, his eyes lost as he scanned the menu. Diane approached, arms crossed. "Excuse me, what do you need?" she asked. The man stammered, "Just a coffee. Please, I'll pay when my friend arrives." Diane's arms tightened across her chest, her voice cold. "I'm sorry. If you don't have the money now, we can't serve you." His head dropped, hands shaking, eyes red as he turned to leave. Maya stepped forward, gently placing her hand on Diane's shoulder. "Let me handle this." Diane turned, eyes stunned. Maya walked over to the man, smiling softly. "Please, sir, you can sit here, have a hot coffee, and if you need a piece of toast, Just let me know." The man looked up, tears filling his eyes, his lips trembling. "Thank you. Thank you." Diane clenched her teeth. "Are you paying out of your own pocket again?" Maya. Maya turned to Diane, her gaze steady. "No, Diane. This is a diner, not a courtroom. Everyone deserves respect here, no matter how much money they have in their pockets." The entire diner fell silent. Hector smiled at Maya, and a few regulars nodded gently, as if silently thanking her. Diane took a deep breath, turning away without another word. As the man took a sip of the hot coffee, his hands stopped shaking, and he looked up at Maya with a grateful smile. Maya returned it with a gentle smile of her own, her eyes reflecting the certainty that she had made the right choice in accepting this position, because management wasn't about power, but about protecting the values that made Havens what it was: warmth, respect, and compassion. 3 days after Maya officially stepped into her role as assistant manager, the atmosphere inside Havens Corner Diner began to change. Customers returned, not just for the hot food or cheap coffee, but because they felt welcome. They felt like this place was a warm stop in the busy chaos of their lives. Smiles and thank yous became more frequent, and even Hector commented, "The place feels brighter these days, you know that." Maya. But Diane didn't see it that way. She saw the diner as slower, saw Maya spending too much time with each customer, and noticed a few co-workers starting to look at Maya with respect instead of the cautious fear they once reserved for Diane. Worse, she saw the words she had always spoken, that kindness doesn't last long, being proven wrong by Maya every day. That afternoon, when the customers had thinned out, Diane stepped into the walk-in cooler, closing the door, clenching her fists. She was afraid. For years, Diane had survived in this industry with coldness, control, and strictness. She had never allowed herself to be pitied, never allowed anyone to cross her boundaries, because Diane's life had once been crushed, and she had sworn never to let it happen again. She closed her eyes, memories flooding back 19 years old, leaving home alone, being exploited by her former boss, humiliated by customers, taken advantage of by co-workers. She learned to be tough to survive. And now, a girl like Maya, with her gentle smile and steady eyes, was threatening to break the shell Diane had built around herself for a lifetime. At that moment, Maya stepped into the walk-in, holding the inventory clipboard. Diane spun around, her eyes sharp as blades. "What do you want?" Maya froze, but then took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Diane, I want to talk. About what? About how you're handing out free coffee to the homeless while you pretend to be this diner's little angel." Diane snapped. Maya looked at Diane, her eyes no longer afraid, but quiet and patient. "I'm not an angel. I just don't want people to leave here hungry and cold." Diane let out a hollow laugh. "Kindness doesn't feed anyone." Maya was silent for a moment before speaking softly. "Maybe you're right, but are you truly happy, living in a way where you can't believe in anyone's kindness anymore?" At that moment, Diane's shoulders trembled. Tears threatened to fall, but she clenched her jaw to hold them back, turning away. her voice rough. "You don't understand. You don't know how harsh this industry is." Maya stepped closer, her voice softening. "I don't know everything, but I see how tired you are, how lonely you are, how you're fighting everyone, even when you don't need to." Diane didn't respond, just clenched her fists tighter, her nails digging into her palms until they drew blood, her breathing ragged. Just then, there was a knock on the door. Thomas Rowe appeared, his calm gaze landing between Maya and Diane. "Hello, ladies. May I come in?" Diane quickly wiped her tears, inhaling sharply, turning back with her cold mask in place. "What do you need, Mr. Rowe?" she asked. Thomas looked at Diane, then at Maya, nodding slightly. "I want to have an honest conversation, especially with you." "Diane." Thomas set a folder down on the shelf in the walk-in, his voice low but warm. "Diane, you're competent. I've seen the reports, the way you handle costs, the way you optimize processes. No one can take that away from you." Diane pressed her lips together, a flicker of pride and suspicion crossing her eyes. "But," Thomas continued, "the way you manage people is destroying havens. It makes employees afraid, drives customers away, forces people like Maya to choose between their conscience and their job." The air in the cooler thickened, filled only with Diane's heavy breathing. Thomas spoke softly, but firmly. "I don't want to fire you, Diane. I believe there's something good still in your heart, something this world made you forget. But you need to change." Diane scoffed. "You think your words will change me?" Thomas fell silent, then looked at Maya and said quietly, "Maybe not my words, but Maya's actions." Diane turned to look at Maya, and for the first time, it wasn't with contempt, but with the gaze of someone seeing a version of herself she had lost a long time ago. A week passed, and Haven's Corner Diner opened on a calm Sunday morning. Golden sunlight streamed through the windows that Maya had polished to a clear shine, casting shadows of the falling leaves outside. Maya woke up earlier than usual, making her mother a cup of ginger tea before leaving home. Her mother smiled weakly, squeezing Maya's hand. "I'm proud of you, Maya. You're living true to what you believe." That evening, Haven's Corner Diner turned off its lights, leaving only the glow of the streetlights shining through the foggy windows, casting shadows on the neatly arranged chairs. Maya stood at the counter, taking off her manager badge, pressing it against her chest, smiling. For the first time in years, she felt she was not just surviving, but living, making a difference. She looked around the diner, at each table, each corner, all holding memories of times she had given an extra glass of water to a weary customer, a piece of bread to a crying child, or simply a smile to a lonely elder. Maya stepped out of the diner into the cool night air, the scent of rain still lingering on the streets. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from her mother. "I love you, Maya. Thank you for not giving up." Tears streamed down Maya's face, but this time they were tears of happiness. She looked up at the star-filled sky, whispering, "Thank you, Mum, for teaching me how to keep kindness alive, no matter how harsh the world may be." Across the street, in the shadows. Thomas Rowe stood watching Maya, his eyes softening. He knew the rebirth of Havens hadn't begun with restructuring plans, but with a single server who had the courage to stand up for kindness, to keep smiling when no one else dared. The next day, customers came to Havens again, bringing their stories, their weariness, their silent burdens, but they left with smiles, with a wish for have an easier day, with kindness offered by the humble souls in this old diner. And Maya, standing at the counter, seeing those grateful eyes, knew she had chosen well, choosing kindness, choosing courage, choosing to be the one who brings hope.